Before I get into all the NFL rule changes that happened today, is the tuck rule the worst officiating call of all time? Give me a yes, give me a no. My answer, well, you already know. It's a yes, baby. Raider Nation, what's going on? It's Mitchell Renz here, host of the Raiders Report, and coming up on today's show, we're going to get into some Raiders news that has been discussed over the past few weeks, and unfortunately, it's probably going to be a little bit of a Debbie Downer to some of the OGs that are out there. Also, huge NFL news around some of the rule changes that happened today. I'm going to be breaking down what all these rule changes are and ultimately how it's going to impact the Las Vegas Raiders and impact all 32 NFL teams. Before we get into it, though, no Napa time here for the Silver and Black. And there was a report that the Raiders won't have training camp in Napa in 2025. I know it was expected that this is going to happen. I will admit this is still not a 100% sealed in fact, but it does sound like the Raiders are going to be hosting training camp, hosting a lot of their offseason stuff again in Henderson, Nevada, which doesn't really surprise me all that much. But I do know that a lot of Raiders fans loved when training camp was in Napa from 1996 to 2019. If you thought that, yes, the Raiders are going to have training camp there, hopefully this news doesn't, ruin your day too much. At the end of the day, though, when Raiders news happens, I want you to hit that subscribe button. I want you to stay in the loop. And even on a day like today where, I'll be real, not a lot of Raiders news happened today, but a lot of news around the NFL happened, and I don't know if y'all know this, but the Raiders do play in the National Football League. And coming up, I'm going to break down all of the rules that happened today. There were some rules around the tush push. We won't really get into that one. It's only going to be the rules that were officially made today, and there's a bunch of them, so just give me a little bit of time to be able to read through them, kind of talk you guys through what's important and what's not exactly important to know. So I'll explain the approved NFL rule changes for 2025, and hopefully, if you're a part of the Noti gang, you enjoyed today's episode. Let's go to the very first rule that happened. This is 1A. By competition committee, amend Rule 6 to make permanent the new form of free kick play implemented in 2024 designed to resemble a typical scrimmage play by aligning players on both teams closer to the line and restricting movement to reduce space and speed. 2, promote more returns subject to the following changes. Modifies the alignment requirements for receiving team players in the setup zone. Changes the dead ball spot after a touchback to the 35-yard line if the ball lands in the end zone and is down in the end zone by the receiving team or goes out of bounds behind the receiving team's goal line. If you were like me and you read all that and you're like, I don't even understand what any of that just meant, that's how I am exactly, and that's why I wanted to be able to make this show, because you read that and I'm kind of even more confused after I read it. So now what I'm going to do is be able to walk you through of what that means and how it impacts the Raiders. So the Raiders currently need a return man, and I do think that new rule is going to lead to more kick returns, and I almost wonder if somebody like Trey Tucker, who did it at Cincinnati, could get a bit of a boost, especially because of how weak this running back room is right now. And I think when you look at the new kickoff return rules that started last year, you saw a lot more teams go with a running back approach because it designed to be more of a running style in terms of just overall offense. Geno Smith does make this Raiders offense better. So if you're going to be starting on the 35-yard line more, it could lead to more scoring opportunities for the Raiders, and I think that you're going to see more scoring opportunities in the NFL across the board. Also, Carlson is an experienced kicker, which in this situation, I do believe helps out a lot. So the picture that you're going to see is what is known as a heat zone. And if you can see the Raiders, which the Texans are in the top left, the very, very bottom right there is the Indianapolis Colts. So essentially what you see on screen right now is the Raiders were the 6th best team at not kicking the ball out of the back of the end zone. The reason why that's important is because when you kick the ball out of the back of the end zone, NFL teams are now going to get the ball to start at the 35-yard line. So if you're somebody like me, you have an experienced kicker in Daniel Carlson, he's going to be able to put that ball where it needs to go instead of kicking it out of the back of the end zone. So I do actually think that this helps out a lot. Also, this is a pretty good tweet, which I think just kind of explains it a little bit more. This is from Kevin Seifert. With the touchback spot change, the NFL has been projecting an increase in the return rate from 33% in 2024 to between 60 and 70% in 2025. There are some downstream aspects that could come into play in terms of field position, scoring, game management when you add that many plays. If you're somebody like me where you're like, I don't know exactly what you're going to get out of Trey Tucker this upcoming season, But because Tucker has that wrestling background, because he's got great acceleration, if you were the silver and black with a new regime and you don't know exactly where to put Trey, I actually do think that these new rules do really help out a player like Trey Tucker. Let's go to the next rule change that happened today in the NFL. By competition committee aligns the postseason and regular season overtime rules by granting both teams an opportunity to possess the ball regardless of the outcome of the first possession, subject to a 10-minute overtime period in the regular season. The reason why I think that I like this a lot, it goes back to, you guys remember that unbelievable Chiefs-Bills playoff game a few years ago where it was just both teams going back and forth, and the Chiefs ended up winning it because they got the ball first, and then ended up scoring a touchdown. I like this rule a lot because in playoffs, both teams I do think should get the opportunity to score. I also will say that because this rule is new-ish, it does kind of go along the lines of the way that college goes. I get it, college starts at the 25, but you are seeing a regime like the Raiders that brought in a lot of college coaches. I wonder if they take that college game approach and can implement it to the NFL. We always see teams try to copycat each other, but the fact that the Raiders are a team that's going to be trying to be a balanced attack, not just offense, not just defense, this team's going to be built to be a balanced team. I do think these new rules help teams that are built along that way. Let's go to another rule change that happened today by the competition committee. Amends Rule 15 to expand instant replay's ability to advise the on-field officials on specific objective aspects of a play and or to address game administration issues when clear and obvious video evidence is present. Let's face the facts. How many times have we sat up here on this show and we're like, man, that was a bad call? And I think at the end of the day, I'm the type of person where I just want him to get it right. Even if it's, a play that goes against the Raiders, me as a football fan, I want them to get the call right. So they're going to be able to review face masks, defenseless players, horse collar tackles, tripping, roughing the kicker. The one that's not on here that I'm like, shame on you, NFL, is roughing the passer, right? Because you can't watch the Kansas City Chiefs half the time because they get calls that nobody else gets. But I do think that what is happening here is the NFL is applying pressure to the NFL officials because it was a big story in the playoffs. It was a big story at the back half of last season. And Chiefs fans aren't going to admit it, but it made games a little bit difficult to watch when you knew that Kansas City was going to get calls that no other team was going to get those calls. So I like that we're moving in the right direction because I think we're moving in the right direction of let's just get the flipping call right. I don't care if it was called on the field or not. Let's just get it called right. Let's go to some more rule changes here that are going to impact the Raiders. So this one amends Article, I'm not even going to try to do that, 1716 of the Constitution and bylaws to permit clubs to designate 2 players for return at the roster reduction to 53 players. So sit down with me and let's try to walk this one through. Think about how many times the past few seasons, and Brandon Faison is the player that I want you to keep in mind when I talk about this rule, because we would get to the 53-man roster cut down days, and we would sit there and go, well, is Brandon Faison even healthy, right? Why am I going to keep a Brandon Faison on the team if I don't know if he's even going to be able to play? Because of this new rule, Raiders have placed players on IR, 53 roster cuts, and then, you see Faison, and then the next day they're like, well, now we're going to put him on the IR, and then they're going to add 2 more players. That's not going to happen. Essentially, what the Raiders and all NFL teams can do is you're going to be able to carry 55 players if 2 of those guys are going to go into the IR. So instead of saying 53-man roster cuts, you can have 55 players, and then you keep 53, and then you just designate those 2 players to go to IR, which I love that they're doing this, and they're doing it the right way, because what's not fair is the players that get cut and then in 24 hours, then they just end up re-signing to the team. I like that rule a lot, and you're going to see this one implemented in August. Hopefully I explained that one okay. Let's go to the other rule here, which, again, this is the participating in the postseason to receive 2 additional DFRs, increasing to a maximum from 8 to 10 players. So for those that don't know, this is essentially players that aren't able to play at the end of the season. If you get put on the IR, what does DFR stand for again? Designated for return. Yeah, these are the designated for return players. So because the Raiders last season had tons of injuries, this is going to help out a team if you're in a situation like the Raiders where you just need bodies to put on the field. And, you got to make the postseason first, right? But I do think teams that value depth, teams that value, we're going to try to make the best roster we possibly can from 1 to 53 instead of just overspending a ton of money on our top players and then our depth's going to stink, which, you look at the Raiders roster last season, the depth on this team was not very good, but for an organization that battled some injuries, look at the Raiders. They just hired 2 new people to their strength and conditioning staff. for teams that are battling the injury bug, this could help you out a lot. And at the end of the day, I want the best product on the field when it comes to the playoffs. This is a rule that is going to help all NFL teams do that. Let's go to another rule change that happened today. To insert point differential as the third tiebreaker for awarding contracts. So this one you got to look at for waiver claims. And right now, as it stands, waiver claims the first 3 weeks are based on the NFL draft, and then after the first 3 weeks, it's based on win-loss, right? So the Raiders were always at the top waiver team last year because they were one of the worst teams in the National Football League. So now what's essentially going to come down to is that third tiebreaker if the Raiders and Texans are both, 2-1, right? Or I guess technically like 2-3, and then the other tiebreaker, which I forget which that one is, but if it comes down to it, point differential is going to be the impacting on waiver claims. This one is probably the least important that I'm going to talk about today on the Raiders Report. Coming up next here, though, some interesting new free agency rules that, I'm not going to lie, I think that it's actually really going to help the Las Vegas Raiders, and you might not understand it at first. I didn't really understand it at first, but once I was able to break it down a little bit, I think that you guys can see, all right, yeah, these new free agency rules are going to help out the Raiders a lot. Before I get into it, though, today's show is presented by Mount Raidermore. Huge shout-out to everybody that makes this show possible, from Raider Ron, David Zahn, Wild 114, Trivan, John Borelli, Patrick B., R.I.P. to the Great Tuna. What about Justin Abgen, Ira Jackson, John Scheffler, Lord Cameron Abbott, and Venthrak? And the message that these guys wanted me to get out there today, I also got to throw in 93 Nabman. He's been an absolute legend this month. They wanted me to bring some awareness to all the electricians, all the hardworking people around the country like plumbers, carpenters, the skilled trades throughout the country, because my dad also is somebody that can build anything with his hands. And I think in today's day and age, it's kind of like a profession. All those professions are not appreciated as much as what they once were, but they are super critical in today's day and age to keep the country, to keep the world running the way that it is. So the Associated Builders and Contractors is a national construction industry trade association, which is representing more than 23,000 members. If you want to get more information, you can go to abc.org, which stands for Associated Builders and Contractors Trade Academy. It's based on the merit shop philosophy. We help our members develop people, win work, and deliver work safely, ethically, and profitably for the betterment of the communities in which they work. So if anybody lives in the Tennessee area, I know 93 Nabman is a big part of that. If anybody has any more questions regarding that, again, go to abc.org. Huge shout out to Mount Raidermore. And again, huge shout out to everybody that keeps this country running the way that it is. Let's go to the next segment here on the Raiders Report, and it's going to be some more rules that were approved today by, this one was put out there by the Steelers. For 1 year only, permits clubs to have one video or phone call with no more than 5 prospective unrestricted free agents during the 2-day negotiating period. Permits clubs to make travel arrangements with such players upon agreeing to terms. So the way that I essentially would break that down is, how like NFL, like with draftees, they have like top 30 visits. Imagine if you were able to do a top 5 visit with an NFL free agent, and that would also help us fans maybe understand which direction the team is trying to go in. So that's why I like it from our standpoint. But I also really like it because think about it as a recruiting trip. If you're an NFL athlete, would you want to go to a recruiting trip to Cleveland, or would you want to go to a recruiting trip to Las Vegas, right? Like, would you rather go to Las Vegas, or would you rather go to, Jugs, like Houston? I think a lot more people will pick Las Vegas because it is Las Vegas, and you're going to be able to take that trip even if it's a short amount of time. I think it's also really important because if you're able to hop on a Zoom call and you're able to talk to these players and you're able to do that, and it's a little bit differently than years past where really it's just an agent involved, that also really helps out the Raiders. Why? People want to talk to Pete Carroll. People are going to want to talk to Chip Kelly. People want to talk to Tom Brady. If I'm the Raiders, I figure out every way possible to get Tom Brady on that call, because there's not a single person in the NFL that wouldn't want to pick up the phone or wouldn't want to pick up a Zoom and hop on a phone call with Tom Brady. And if you can get Brady in this regime, a very likable regime, on a phone call with some of these players to start, and then you get them out to Vegas, I think that that's actually going to lead to us getting more players down the line, especially if the Raiders are going to operate the way that they did this past offseason. Let's go to another rule here, and this is regarding K-balls, which this is to permit clubs to prepare kicking footballs, K-balls, before game day, similar to the process permitted for game footballs. As you can see, Las Vegas is one of the teams that, really wanted this rule to go in. So specifically marked footballs used for kicking plays only, like field goals, extra points, and kickoffs, they're going to have a K on them. So specifically for kickoff balls, these are going to be prepped at least 2 hours and 30 minutes before kickoff, and 6K balls are delivered to the game official. So what you don't want is teams doctoring up some footballs, or there was a lot of teams in the past that used to like try to compact the ball a little bit, almost make it like a ball. That way you can send it off a little bit more. They're just trying to keep the kicking game a lot more aligned, and because I think we hear about it more in the passing game, probably because of Deflategate and Tom Brady, where it wasn't as much of a thing for kicking football. So K-balls, that's one of the new league rules. Let's go to another new league rule here. And again, shout out to all y'all for kind of going through this with me. I know it's kind of boring, but it's the only way that I was able to kind of explain what happened to all the NFL rules today. So, to permit clubs that may qualify for the postseason to obtain scouting credentials for 2 consecutive games, week 17 and 18, played by a potential postseason opponent, also requires club hosting wildcard games to provide scouting credentials to all teams within the same conference who are participating in the postseason. So let's break that down in 2 parts. The first part is, if you're in the mix for the playoffs, you can send scouts to opponents you might play against in the final 2 weeks. So if you want an example, let's say the Raiders want to send scouts to the Ravens because they're getting ready to play the Ravens in 2 weeks. Like, you're going to be able to do that. Let's also look at the second part of that quote. Wildcard home teams have to allow scouts from the other teams in the same conference to watch the wildcard game. I mean, that's kind of an interesting one, right? Like, if you're the Las Vegas Raiders, go back and look at, last year, where the Broncos, the Chargers, the Chiefs, all those teams ended up making the playoffs. You could actually go and scout those teams, which I find pretty interesting. I know this is the Raiders Report. I know there was a lot of different NFL news out there. Hopefully I did an okay job explaining how it all goes down. It's not typically what I do, but when I see something and it confuses me, and I'm a big NFL guy, like I know a lot of people watching the show, but I need the dumbed-down version in order for me to understand things. So if you like today's show, hopefully you subscribe. Hopefully you tune in to all of our Raiders Report shows the entire offseason.